Hello, Manfried fans. Sorry for the delay. I had to make a quick trip down to Walmart, but I'm gonna call my good friend Eleri Harris now, so let's get started.
Hello.
Hello, you are live on YouTube with me, Caitlin, and Eleri Harris. Yay!
Hi.
Sorry, I was a bit late. We made a trip down to Walmart. It was very exciting. As you can imagine.
You're living the dream, Caitlin.
Yes, living the American dream right now. God, that place, I don't know why, but like Walmart is just so much more unpleasant than any other like store I've ever been into, and I can't quite put my finger on why, but every time I go in there I just like feel so like despondent and like it drains the energy out of my soul somehow. We're only in there for like 20 minutes. Ugh. I hate it.
Oh man. Yeah, I can kind of relate to that. I think the first time I really like went into Walmart was one in rural Kentucky as well. It was ginormous, unbelievable size. So it's not just like, you know, emotionally overwhelming, it's physically overwhelming as well.
And I can't imagine why, but there was someone in front of us who had like a whole shopping trolley full of their like weekly groceries, and I was like, who is doing their grocery shop at Walmart? Like, there are better options.
Well, they might be cheaper. I don't know. I can honestly tell you I haven't been to Walmart for some time. What were you getting at Walmart, Caitlin?
We had to buy some plastic storage containers because we're moving like next weekend and we needed somewhere to like store things. So that was the reason.
Right. That's a pretty good reason.
So on top of having a deadline to get this book finished, we also have to move house.
Wait, how long have you got on the book, and when are you moving house?
I have 2 weeks left on the book, and we're moving next week.
Right. So perfect timing then.
Perfect timing, yes. Everything is just lining up perfectly. Life is good. Life is fine. Anyway, enough about me. What's some recent news with you, Larry? So surely something interesting must have happened to you in the last few weeks.
So 2 weeks ago, I gave a talk on Editorial Comics at XOXO in Portland, here in Oregon. And the next morning, I went into labor and I had a baby.
Wow, that is exciting.
Yeah, I think everyone was worried about me, like, actually having a baby on stage, because at that point in time, I was supposed to have had a baby 3 days earlier, and
wow.
so...
I can't believe you still gave the talk.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you're waiting for a baby to arrive, is anything to distract you is good, so,
true, yeah.
You know, yeah, I was pretty okay with it, so, yeah,
So,
it was good.
Boy or girl?
Oh, I had a boy. His name is Jarvis, and he didn't fit into any of the clothes that we brought to the hospital because even though he's 8 pounds, he's really skinny.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm currently going through, this is what I'm doing on my Sunday, I'm going through a pile of tiny little baby clothes because too many of the tiny little baby clothes are too big for him. So
Jesus.
we have to put them aside, yeah.
Well, at least he'll grow into them.
Yeah. There's no wastage here. They're just, you know, literally, because when you say that you're going to have a baby, people just show up at your house with like bags of baby clothes because they only fit into them for a few weeks, right? So
yeah, that's true.
like people have these leftover clothes. So we've accumulated a small. This baby has more clothes now than I have ever owned in my entire life.
Well, at least they're small.
Yeah.
Clothes are small.
Yeah. Yes, they fit in one drawer.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a thing in my life. I don't know. I feel like it's been a bit of a time for like mum comics because Sarah Glidden had a baby earlier this year and she's been doing a lot of short little cartoons about that and Lauren Weinstein's book came out recent. I think at SBX. I think it debuted the book about being a baby that is pretty awesome. So I'm sort of feeling inspired. Maybe I need to do like a cartoon about this whole, brand new motherhood experience.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, there's not enough cartoons about like family life. As the comics population is aging, there's like, I don't know, I feel like there's more and more cartoons about people's families out there. So
you gotta grow with your audience, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least grow with your peers. It's happening. Yeah. So that's cool. I do want to do a cartoon about it though, because it's so hilarious, the things that happen when you're pregnant or when you're like, when you have a baby that you just had no idea about. I'm currently dealing with the fact that my baby pees himself in the eye almost every time I change him, because it turns out that's a thing that boys do that I would never have known anything about.
Right.
Yeah, and his favorite thing in the world right now is the hair dryer that we use to dry his butt with, because he's got nappy rash or diaper rash for those North Americans out there, and and it turns out the best way to deal with that is to dry their butt with a hairdryer. And you turn it on, and it's like Pavlovian at this point. He just like calms down. He's like, "Oh, this is great," and he like rolls side to side and like gurgles and smiles. Like he loves it. He's super into the hairdryer.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I wonder if that is gonna manifest itself some way later in life. yeah. His kink in his 30s is gonna be what I'm really, really into. Get out that hairdryer. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so what do you do? I'm not looking on the internet. What are you drawing right now? Like, describe for me what you're doing. So right now, I have like some inked pages from Kelly, which I'm just like putting in the color flats for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm just going through and like tidying up the inks a little bit. She seems to have drawn one of the men's heads on backwards, so I need to just fix that real quick.
Kelly, what are you doing?
So I totally understand we're both on the same deadline, so I can feel it.
Oh man.
But yeah, and then I'm just going through and adding the color flats. I was talking to my boss a couple of weeks ago. I think it was like the day before I was about to fly out to SBX. I was saying like, yeah, I'm just gonna like stay here at the office like all night, and then I'm gonna get on the plane at like 5 a.m. Because I have so much work to do that I don't have time to sleep. And he looked at me like I was insane. And I was like, what? This is just my life. And I'm assuming out of pity for me, he suggested that I utilize one of the girls in the office that I work with, who's like one of our background designers, that she could like help me do some of the coloring on the pages. So I have her for like 2 days next week, so I need to like get through the color flats as quickly as I can so she can go through and like finish it coloring the pages. But she's like super quick and super good, so I'm sure that she'll be able to get through like a ton of it, and that's pretty much the only thing that's gonna mean that I can make the deadline. Is that I now have this extra helper.
That's so awesome. What a great offer from your boss.
I'll be like making up for her missed work time by like working on the weekend, but that's okay. I'm so used to working on weekends now that it's not even a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the world of like comics, right? When you're trying to balance like professional work and personal work. So like
the deadline honestly wouldn't be a problem at all if I wasn't also working like a day job, because it's the only time that I can make real headway on it is on the weekends. And then if I lose a weekend, like when I was down at SBX, I was like, oh, I can't work this entire weekend, so it's like I've lost like a huge chunk of like work that I could have got done.
Caitlin, I can't believe you just said that going to SBX was a loss in any way.
I mean, like,
so sad.
For the longest time, I was like debating. I was like, should I go? Should I not go? Like, it's going to be bad timing. And also, like, because I lost my passport earlier in the year, I didn't think I'd be able to go.
Oh, what? Have you got a new one? Is it like sorted?
I did sort it. I managed to get a new one, and I did go to SBX. And of course, I never regret going there. It's the best. But yeah, at the time I was like, oh, am I going to be able to swing this?
Oh, no. Well, tell me about SBX, because I, missed it because I was like, I was in some kind of manic sleep deprivation cycle with an infant. So, like, tell me about it. What happened? What were the highlights?
I honestly spent a lot of it asleep. I mean, other than like being at my table, I didn't go to the Ignats, which I usually do, but this year Matt was really sick as well, and so I just kind of like bailed on it. But apparently there was a lot of some controversy at the Ignats Awards. People were booing Robert Crumb, as you might have heard.
Yes, I did hear about that.
They were booing the concept of Robert Crumb.
That's interesting. I kind of was hoping that you would have more insider goss on that, Caitlin. You've utterly failed me.
I know, the one time that I don't go to the Ignats and it's all just going down. I did watch like a kind of video that somebody had taken, a video recap, and it was I think it was like Rich Pope. Is that his name?
Richie Pope, yeah. Yes,
who had won an Ignats, and he was giving a speech, and he just mentioned Robert Crumb in passing, something along the lines of that we're sort of doing away with the old guard now, and there's like a new generation, and people were like, boo.
Well, wasn't there the controversy, like, was it last year or earlier on this year, when Mice announced they were going to change one of the rooms at one of the Massachusetts shows, that one of the rooms in the show was called the Robert Crumb room, and they were no longer going to call it the Robert Crumb room. They were changing it out with somebody else.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so yes. I guess this is not a standalone diss for Mr. Crumb here.
Yeah, Mr. Crumb. Will he defend himself? Probably not.
I mean, I don't even know. Would he have ever even gone to SBX or any of those kinds of shows?
I don't think so, no.
I feel like he's been famous for too long now.
Yeah. I've honestly never read any of his comics. I have no opinion one way or the other. I've seen them online, obviously. Like, I know that they're awful, but yeah, I wouldn't even ever bother defending him.
Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because there's different. I feel like there's this generational thing like happening a lot in cartooning, like about like what's socially acceptable and what's not socially acceptable,
right.
And like, culture is constantly evolving, even in the comics world. And I think it's really, I don't know, I agree with the idea that, we are, there is a shift that's happened already away from cartoonists like Crumb that are, like that kind of era was so much about like, white male cartoonists and
sad boy comics, right?
Yeah, sad boy comics. Yeah, totally. And there's been that controversy in the last, like a week ago, about the Serena Williams cartoon that an editorial cartoon by Mark Knight in Australia, which is horribly racist.
And that was extremely distasteful.
Yeah. I don't know how you could even like look at it and not be like, oh, that's problematic, like I don't understand. But I feel like there's this
completely unsurprised that it came out of Australia.
I know, the most comfortably racist country in the world. Yeah, it's really sad. But it's like, I feel like there's this thing with like an older guard especially in the world of editorial cartoons, where people are like, they just, to them it's not. They don't see things in that particular way, like they're not. I mean, and I watched a video of Ron Wimberly being interviewed on CNN talking about that cartoon, and he said he said this thing about like, he's like, well, we really need to, maybe a conversation needs to be about the editorial process, like that. Right. This went, like, there were editors, there are people who think it's okay to publish that. Like, to me it's like, there's a difference between a cartoonist putting something like a racist cartoon that they drew on their own Twitter feed or Tumblr or whatever, right. And like someone like a team of people looked at this. Like,
yeah, there would have been like more than one editor who looked at that cartoon and was like, this is fine.
Yeah, totally. And like, maybe that's a thing there should be a conversation about. Like,
because which newspaper was it in again? Was it the Australian?
I think it was the Herald Sun.
The Herald Sun, right. Probably, I'm guessing, a Murdoch Press paper.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, just based on the content that they allow to be published.
Yes. They're a particular type of, editorial cartoonist. Although I will defend Kudelka, who I think is a great cartoonist. John Kudelka does stuff for News Limited. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's like it's interesting when this issues in editorial cartooning are constantly being talked about, especially like you think about the difference between like French cartoonists and cartoonists from overseas who have like a totally different set of like what is okay and what is not okay in editorial. It's interesting to think of it that kind of line being drawn in indie comics as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. I don't know. What else happened at SBX?
Gosh, hang on, I don't even know. Sold some comics, ate some food, the usual. Actually, speaking of editorial comics, I did get a subscription to the Nib magazine.
Oh, did you now?
I did. Lovchansky just talked me into it while I was standing near the table. I was like, well, you're a good salesman. All right, I'll pick up a subscription. And I read the whole thing cover to cover, and it's amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad you like that. That's awesome.
I love it. I love the little historical comics section that Warren did too.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was adorable. I was like, oh my god, I love this. I'm assuming that's going to be like a section in each magazine, right?
Yeah. Because we do publish a lot of these like archival comics from these ones were from Warren's collection, but we also have like a kind of the Nib has a relationship with the Billy Island Museum and Library in Ohio, and we do like publish like archival cartoons or cartoons that are like that are past their they're passed into public domain and they're kind of weirdly relevant for the modern era. So we put out a few of those. So yeah, that's definitely going to be an ongoing feature of the Nib magazine, which I didn't see it before SBX because that's where they were all arriving. And Matt Bors came over to my house the other day to meet my baby and hand me what he described as my other baby, which is the first issue of the magazine.
And it looks amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad it turned out well. Actually, like I think the cover stock looks really nice.
It does.
Which is like pretty sweet, but it was a real experience because I don't know if you're really aware, but like this is like the Nib editorial team putting together a magazine, and we have never worked in print before. Like we've done one anthology like 3 years ago.
That's very true.
This was a whole new thing for us.
Where did you get them printed? Were they printed in like China?
No, they were printed in Pennsylvania.
Right.
So yeah, they're printed by a publisher called Sheridan, or printing house called Sheridan. They were, we had like a relationship with Bosca, who is a guy who founded Jacobin magazine. And we sort of like talked to him a lot about like where to get stuff printed and things like that. And that was one of his suggestions. So yeah. It's been pretty cool. I can tell you what though, like putting together a magazine, there's like a whole range of issues that you don't experience putting together stuff online. And it was the first issue was a huge learning curve. And I think that every issue after this will be a lot easier because we now have a much better idea of what we actually need to do.
So what were some of the things that like surprised you about it?
I think stuff like we wound up spending a lot more money on art than we initially planned on, in part because like we just needed we had things that we ended up needing to get done out of house basically.
Right.
But we also we're pretty committed to paying people properly for their work. So if people ended up having to do a few extra pages here and there, we were like, oh, we're gonna do that. Yeah. But because the Kickstarter was so successful, like we got 3 times what we expected to get.
Wow.
What we needed to get. That was like initially I was really anxious about how much money we were spending on stuff. I was like, oh God, this is I don't know how this is gonna go. This might be we do 4 issues and never again. But in the end, like we got so much support from the comics community. It was actually really awesome to see. Like we funded in 12 hours, and that made a huge difference to like because by the time we had funded, we'd already done most of the legwork on the magazine. Like almost all the artwork was already in for the first issue.
Right.
So it was so reassuring. It was like, oh, people actually want this, you know. We're not making something for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was really cool. And like some of the pieces that we put in there, I was like really surprised at like how well they looked printed, if that makes sense. Like, because you don't really have any idea of like how it's gonna, like you can tell things, the way something looks on a screen is not the way it's gonna look on a piece of paper, right?
Yeah. And like so all of this stuff is like was like drawn specifically for the magazine. It wasn't stuff that you'd commissioned earlier for like the website. Yeah,
so that's what's really different about the anthology and this, is that this is everything in here was specifically commissioned for this magazine. So it's not appeared on the website. It will eventually appear on the website, but not for a little while, because, you know, we wanted to make it like a special thing. And there are some things in there that just won't ever appear on the website. So stuff like we got Vanessa Del Rey, who's a cartoonist who has never done anything for the nib, but we really loved her illustrative style. She did a bunch of quotes in there that are like these beautiful like illustrated quotes from like people like
I remember them.
Yeah, and so we've got those are not going to go on the website because we can't figure out how that would work or why that would work in any other purpose. It's just a nice thing to have in the magazine. Yeah. So it was really fun, and our designer for the magazine was actually Mark Kaufman, who's a cartoonist we work with regularly on. He does like editorial cartoons and stuff.
Right.
So in a lot of ways the magazine is like the most nib thing that we could make. It's like so many people in it that we work with all the time, and like even the whole layout is designed by a person that we work with a lot. So
I was gonna ask if you hired a designer for it or if it was somebody that you had in house.
Well, we actually so we had like this whole thing where we were like, do we hire proper, like, you know, like a designer? We looked around and we talked to people because there was no way that, I don't know, like me and Matt Bors and Matt Lubchansky are not exactly like, you know, designers, you know, like my background is a journalist, you know, I'm not really, design layout is not really my strong suit. So
and with something as complicated as this, you'd want to like make sure that you're getting it right.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like none of us wanted to be responsible for the files. Like these cartoonists, I'm sure that we've talked about this before, Caitlin, but like, you know, cartoonists are really bad at like meeting deadlines and like sending things in correctly. Like this is just the way that the world works. And so
true. I mean, it's hard because it's never really anyone's full-time job being a cartoonist, so you gotta have a little bit of sympathy for those of us who are juggling many things.
Oh no, definitely. And I do too, because like my day job really is working at the nib, right? So like even though I work in comics, I never make my own personal work, or even work that I do that appears on the nib is very rarely done during work hours. Because you know, being the, you know, deputy / like managing editor of a comics website is a full-time job.
Would you say that your job title is like comic wrangler?
Yeah, cartoonist wrangler. That's
cartoonist
definitely
wrangler,
yeah. That is totally what my job is. It's like hassling people for work and like you know, making sure people like send me paperwork back and like, you know, a lot of boring stuff. But it's good. I don't know. I think that it's like one of the things that's been really great about the magazine is not worrying so much about stuff that's super topical or like, you know, in the news.
Yeah. You don't have to have such a quick turnaround.
No. And we can think a lot more about like, you know, I guess, how do I put this? Like the content that is more feature oriented than the stuff that we would do normally. So like, you know, one of the pieces that we have in here, which is kind of like the most, I think one of the best ones, but also like the most heartbreaking, is this piece by Ted Clausen, who has only ever done one other piece for the nib before that was about, it was a really great piece called a GoFundMe campaign is not healthcare, or something like that.
Right.
And it was about like a friend of his who was another cartoonist who died because he was $50 short of meeting his GoFundMe campaign to buy insulin.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that was pretty bleak. So that was the first cartoon that Ted Clausen did for us that went on the Nib website and was nominated for the Slate Prize this year as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so Ted pitched us this idea of doing a comic about the death of his child.
Yes.
So his first baby was born last November, and the baby did not live very long. And, you know, we sent out like an email to a lot of our regular contributors asking for pictures for the death issue, and he sends us this one, and we were like, whoa, buddy, this is really one.
I mean, you were asking for it, really.
Yeah, I know. But we didn't. I think that this one we had to be like really, how do I put it, like tactful about, you know, like you had to like kind of talk, like walk Ted through, like talk to Ted and be like, basically be honest about it. Like, we're not in any way professionally trained to deal with like grief, you know, psychology or anything like that. And so we were like very much to him, you know, if you want to do this, then we would love to work with you on it. But we also, you know, don't want to make you do this if you don't want to do it, or or if at any point you feel like you can't continue, then you just say that you don't want to do it, because it's a really big deal to be talking to someone about the death of a baby, you know?
Yeah, and especially like putting it out in the world like that.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
and I was pregnant.
I'm sure that it couldn't have been a very it must have been a bit stressful.
Reading his piece, I cried every time I was editing it, like every single time.
Yeah, actually, when Lebtansky was showing me the comic, we were flipping through it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this comic just makes me cry every time I read it," and I was like, "Oh, now I know what I'm in for."
There's a lot. The idea of the magazine is there's funny stuff in there, and there's like, you know, and there's really devastating things in there as well. I mean, like there's that other piece from that's from Liliana Segura and Jackie Roche that's about the capital punishment, like the death penalty.
Right, yeah, that one was insane.
Yeah, and then like, you know, some artists from the Middle East, Yazan Al-Sadi and Gadi Gosin on like racism in death. It's like it's pretty full on. But then we've also got like strips and like funny things, because that's what the nib is, right? You know,
like, you got to balance it out, right? You got to have a good balance.
Yeah, it's got to be some kooky stuff in there. You know, like we sent Andrew Greenstone to a pet, whatchamacallit, medium, like some dead pets. You know, so like there's a lot of different things in there. But I think that the Ted Clausen one is one. Working on that piece will stay with me forever, because I've never experienced such like a level of emotional responsibility for an artist that I'm working with before. Yeah, so that was intense. But Ted's wife is currently pregnant. They're gonna have another baby soon.
Oh,
so
great. Well, that's good
side note, you know, that's just so you know, Caitlin, there's light.
There's light at the end of the tunnel, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for comforting me.
Yeah, I don't know. So what happens after your deadline? So you have to do these color flats, and then you know, obviously get it colored. You're doing the nicer colors with the colleague of yours, and then what happens after that?
There's probably going to be a few weeks of back and forth with the editors at Quirk, just for like tightening things up, making sure there's no spelling errors, like that kind of thing. I like to go through and just check for consistency, because Kelly inks the pages out of order, so sometimes like I'm just like happily coloring along, and I don't realize that maybe one of the characters is wearing a shirt in some panels and not wearing a shirt in other panels, so I have to like go back through all of the pages once they're all done and just like check that they're all consistent. So that's and then like just making little changes like that. So yeah, there's probably it probably won't be like done until the end of October, I'm guessing, because with the last book there was at least 2 or 3 weeks of like back and forth with changes, just to make sure that it's all looking ship shape. And then I'm free forever. The shackles will be lifted, and I will be free.
What are you going to do with your freedom, Caitlin?
Matt actually bought me a video game for my birthday, which that will then become my second job. I'm just gonna play this video game until I'm sick of it, and then I'm gonna get another video game and play that one until I'm sick of it. It's gonna be great.
That sounds like a really good way to, like, you know, build a barrier in your brain from a project ending. I think that's like often a hard thing to do when your project ends and then you have all this free time and you don't really know what to do.
I didn't handle it very well last year once I had finished the first book. I basically just like I like doubled down on like work at my day job, and then I kind of got very burnt out. But we took a vacation around Christmas, and I think that kind of reset things a little bit. But well, like I saw my editor Rick at SBX last week, and he was like, you know what? In hindsight, we probably shouldn't have done 2 books back to back. And I was like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have, because I am like just crashing and burning. I'm like a fucking sun that's going supernova right now. I'm so tired, and it's so hard for me to like maintain my interest in what I'm doing. I'm just like, I just need it to be over.
This is why I've never done a book. I'm like, we're stepping things up from like me having done, you know, a lot of long comics on the internet to working on a magazine, but I haven't like even thought to move beyond the magazine length of anything. So
yeah, well, because that comic that you were working on about the murder trial, didn't that take you a few years to finish?
Yeah, it took me 2 years.
Wow. Like, you must have been pretty sick of it by the end.
Oh my god, dude, I was totally over it, and I still get people writing me like narky things about it, like and this like, so it was on The Conversation. Someone put it on a list of like, you know, Australia's best literary comics, which I was pretty chuffed to be on a list of. But then someone wrote me an email, like wrote me a message being like, you know, this isn't journalism. This is only showing one side of this story. And I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake, did you actually read the first 2 pages where I essentially set up that, yes, I'm interviewing this woman, but I was friends with her in high school.
Yeah.
After this point, any assumptions of balance in journalism can be totally thrown out the window because that's impossible. And I'm just like, I still feel like I'm dealing with the fallout from that comic. So it's not even like, you know, I published it and it was over and whatever. It's like still going on. But, you know, I'm glad that I did it. I think it was worth doing. And maybe I will turn it into a book one day. But I don't know. I need some time.
Yeah, you gotta have some space, right? And like, like the worst part about it is like this whole thing is that like, you know, like I'm tired and I'm miserable and I'm overworked, but like in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know that I'm going to do this again. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if I'm just like a masochist or like what it is, but like, even though I'm like in the depths of misery and whatever, I'm still like, yeah, I'll do it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, because deep down inside, you actually really enjoy it, Caitlin. That's what. You actually love comics.
Yeah,
so.
It's true. Yeah, I think more than that, I like to work. I'm just a workhorse.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, like, it's going to be really interesting for me because I've never had a baby before. I don't know how like my life is going to change in this way, where it's like normally my spare time is like, you know, I do like editorial cartoons for the Australian Education Union magazine and like all this other stuff in my spare time. And I don't think I'll have time to do as much of that stuff anymore, you know? And that's going to be like, I mean, that's going to be like really hard, but also like, I don't know that I'm going to have much regrets because he's so adorable and I really like him.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, you'd want to hope that your baby is more important to you than your, like, hobby.
Than his comics, yes. I mean, that's true. Well, that's why I'm like, maybe I should do a comic about my baby. Because that will be, like, showing my love for my baby, but also, like, comics. So.
You get to enjoy both things. So how long until you go back to work, then?
I'm not going back to work till December. The First Look Media that own the Nib, they have a really good maternity leave policy, which I am very, very happy to enjoy. But it was really interesting, like me going on leave is the first time that a member of the Nib team have taken time off like this before, you know? And so you're
such a small team that like it must be hard to just redistribute the workload.
Oh yeah, it was like, it's kind of crazy. So Sarah Merck and Andy Warner, who are contributing editors, have taken on a lot more work with me gone. We've got a couple of editorial assistants on duty for the next few months, like just doing extra stuff for us. And that's like yeah, that's like really important, actually. Having like having someone else around to load I know this sounds boring, but like loading comics and fact checking scripts and like, you know, that kind of stuff is really, you know, it takes time, but it's, you know,
it's important.
Really important.
Yeah,
it needs to get done. Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, it was really interesting setting up for being on maternity leave because like I've just been doing this job. Like, aside from the 6-month hiatus that we had in 2015, I've been working at the Nib since, well, for like 4 years.
Wow.
And that's like all I've really done. And there's all this stuff that's in my head that wasn't until a few weeks ago actually in a spreadsheet or in a document that someone could follow. So that's been really useful. I've been like, you know, I've had to write out stuff that I didn't think, you know, that I'd never really sort of explained to anyone about why I do something in a particular way. And even like, you know, Lubchansky, who I've worked with for so long, they were like, what even is this, like this mess that you have? And I'm really organized mostly. It's just that there's stuff that, you know, I mean, it's just like there's a lot of things involved in my job that I don't think about, but actually are, you know, kind of important things about, like, you know, because we have a budget, right? Like a monthly budget.
Yeah.
And I have to make sure that we keep within that budget every month because, you know, go outside of that. And so it's not just managing like how every long form comic is going, because we have like 50 long form comics in progress most of the time. And so that's like a lot of different pieces, and because cartoons are all terrible at deadlines, you kind of have to like factor that in, like who is likely to be early, because there are the special unicorns out there who actually finish stuff on time, if not before time, i.e. Makinaro.
What a champ.
Out there that are just like, you know, get it done. And but that means that I have to be like, all right, so they're probably going to get that done in the month that it's actually due. And that means that we need to have that money set aside for them. Right. And then there are people who you legitimately have no idea when they're going to finish. Like,
do they just like disappear and you don't hear from them until they're done?
Yeah, because we have like we have multiple stages in the way that we work with people. So we give feedback at like, you know, scripts, thumbs, pencils, inks, like colors, like every step of the way we want to like have a look at it and make sure it's working well. That's the whole point in having an editor, you know?
Yeah.
And like we have to sort of factor that in as well, because sometimes like, you know, I might take an extra day or two or way too long to like actually send someone feedback on something, and that can delay a project further. Or like sometimes people will send in a script that is great and then send in pencils that are terrible, you know, like, and you just have to kind of like work with that. And when I say terrible, what I mean is it's like the drawings are usually fine because we're you know, getting artists who are good, you know, they're competent, they know what they're doing. It's more that like, you know, we have to get things that work on mobile and desktop, and sometimes layouts are just not going to work. They'll do some design work and you're like, that is really in no way going to be readable on a mobile phone screen, and you have to change that. So.
And it's like, it must be hard for like a cartoonist maybe who's never had to think about that kind of stuff before.
Yeah, definitely. And like cartoonists that, you know, we work with a lot have, you know, have training basically, you know, like spend time working with people and they, you know, like they get to know what we need, and they also become more creative within that, which is really awesome. Like you see people like playing with the form in a way that they might not have played with it before. And yeah, like, so it's kind of like an investment. Everyone we work with, I sort of see them as an investment in like, you know, future art. Like I never work with someone who I'm like, I only want to work with you once. Like my goal is when we start working with someone is that like, we're going to keep working with that person. So we need to set them up for like future projects.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's almost like you're like training them up to, to be like employees.
But I mean, like, that's what you do when you're working on your own projects, right? You and Kelly have trained yourselves to work in a particular way to get these books out. You know?
And like I noticed with this second book, I had way less notes from our editor than the first book, and I was almost like a little bit I couldn't decide if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I was like, are you not sending me as many notes because it's amazing, or are you not sending me as many notes because we both are just like, we're over it now?
No, Caitlin, it's just that you're amazing. That's why it is.
But I mean, it could very well be that, like, yeah, like you said, we've just kind of learned from our like previous book, and now there needs to be less notes because, you know, I've just I'm growing as a person.
Yeah, you're growing as an artist. That's like it's a big deal. It's like everyone gets better at stuff the more they do things. And when you've done something once, and in such, you know, putting out a book is a lot of effort. There's so much work that goes into that, you know. You're really learning from all of that stuff, and even things that you're probably not even thinking about that you're learning from, you know. Like
it was interesting because after the first book, I actually edited a comic at work. We did a little comic based on one of the shows that we make, and I found that like I was better as an editor because I'd gone through it myself, and I was like, oh, I know what's going to work and I know what's not going to work, and I was able to advise the cartoonists who we had drawing the comics. Because a lot of them had never actually drawn a comic before. A lot of them, like, they were animators at the studio who had never drawn a comic, and so I was like, oh, I have, like, the authority here. I'm the one who knows.
Yeah. It turns out you know some stuff about making comics, Caitlin.
Yeah, who could have guessed? But it was kind of vindicating. I was like, oh, good. Like, I feel like I've learned something now.
Yeah. No, I can remember feeling like that when the first piece I edited for the nib was, like, there was a longer form piece, was called Heart Island Hallelujah by Roxanne Palmer, who I think is living in Florida now. She went to the Sequential Arts Workshop in Gainesville there. And I'd never really edited a comic before, but I'd worked as an editor for, like, news media for a long time before that. So I knew about story structure and things like that. And I'd had my own work edited, my own comics edited. And I'd also, like, I did the MFA program at the Center for Cartoon Studies. So, like, you go through a lot of, like, critique and feedback on what comics, like, what works and what doesn't work and stuff in that. Yeah. But, like, some of the best, you know, I think the best training I got was from other people editing my comics.
Yeah.
You know, like, seeing how that works. Like, I did a couple of things for Symbolia, which was like an iPad magazine for comics journalism that was made by Erin Polgreen and Joyce Rice. And Erin now works for Apple News, but she was, like, amazing at editing comics. Like, she would be like she would send you notes, and I was always like, oh my God, she's right. Oh. But, like, it really taught me a lot about, like, not just my own comics practice, but also making comics for digital platforms, you know, like, making comics that, like, work using the best that the medium has to offer, you know, like the importance of the page turn in a book is not the same as a comic on the internet, you know?
Yeah. I actually really love read some comics, some web comics online that are formatted specifically for the scroll. Like, obviously, Emily Carroll's, his face all red. And, like, it was just so suspenseful, like, scrolling down that endless hole, that, like, when she printed it in that book, what was the book called? Into the Woods, I think? It was almost like it didn't have the same impact because it was specifically formatted for the web. Yeah. I always think of that whenever I think of, like, amazing web comics.
Yeah. Emily Carroll's webcomics are like inspiring, you know, like the use of that scroll is so incredible. And I think that there's a lot of our cartoonists who've started doing, like, the really scrolly focused ones. Like, I think of Casimir Casimir Lee, he uses that whole scroll really, really well. And it's like I think that is like an art in itself, like thinking about that in a different way, you know, like thinking about the page as like this endless thing, and there's surprise elements that you can add, and
really getting away from the constraints of, like, the paper page as we think of it, like the printed page.
Yeah, and then Caitlin, you try and take a bunch of people who are used to running a website like the Nib and say,
yeah, we're going back to print now, so enjoy that.
We've got to be the only people in the world who are like, you know what we're going to do to make money? We're gonna start a print publication.
We're bringing back the magazine.
Yeah, we're totally bringing it back.
Everybody said it was dead. They were
wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's why our first issue was death themed.
Yeah.
It's like, print is not dead. Let us prove it. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's like, I don't know. I think that it's really fun to like play between formats with comics. Like when you're thinking about stuff that you make, like, I don't know. I'm sure that for you, like you've done comics in different ways before, like different sizes, different platforms, web comics to print stuff. Like there's a different way of wrapping your head around like the storytelling structure of it as well as the art,
Yeah,
there's like
definitely.
a lot more involved in that. And I think it's really good for you to like train your brain to think in different ways like that. Does that make sense? Like I kind of think it's like a challenge. It's like I love limitations. Like if you say to me, you have to make a comic and it can only be this long, and you're only using 3 colors, and it's got to cover these 5 things, then that's like the most fun for me. Like I love that.
I'm actually kind of curious to experiment with turning some of my strips into like little animated comics, because so one of my workmates made this little video of one of the Manfried comics where he recorded some voices for it, and it wasn't really animated in so much as like the characters were moving, but it was animated in the way that like he was kind of like zooming in on the panels, and it like played so well, and it was really, really funny and amazing that I'm like, I kind of want to like just experiment with doing a little bit of that kind of thing, just throwing them up on YouTube and like seeing where it goes.
Yeah, no, you should totally do that. That sounds great. I love that kind of thing. I like love. There's a thing in Australia that Gabe Clark runs called Read to Me. Do you know of this event?
No,
it's like it's like Bob Sikoriak's Carousel of Comics thing. It's like the idea is like people just like reading like like doing a slideshow essentially, reading their comics. But like I love watching that stuff. Like it's so much fun. Like people going panel to panel, like talking about like reading aloud their own work. And like I just feel like what you're describing is like just a step beyond that.
Yeah, it's basically just like a video version of a comic reading.
yeah. But who doesn't love a comic reading? Like it's so fun.
Actually, when we went on the Manfried book tour earlier in the year, part of it was that we had to give like a talk about the comic, and I was completely unprepared for it. And so what I did is that I just made a slideshow of the first 10 pages of the Manfried book, and I like read them out. But because it was so last minute, I kind of forgot that the first 10 pages of the book don't really have any dialogue in it. It's just like visual gags. And so I was like up on the stage just kind of narrating visual gags very awkwardly.
That's brilliant.
So I think if I do it again, I'm going to have to pick some pages where there's actual dialogue instead of just,
Yeah.
And then Manfried is in a harness.
Oh, man. How was your book tour? I haven't seen you since your book tour. You need to tell me about how it all went.
Well, it was extremely exhausting.
No.
Yeah, so the book came out in May, and like at the time we were still working on the second book. We were in the scripting stage, so and I was aware of the imminent deadline that was coming for me, even though it was like later in the year. But we didn't really have time to stop working on it. So every single flight that I was on, I was madly like typing on my phone, like trying to get the script finished.
Oh my god!
And at the same time, my mom got really sick, and she was in and out of hospital. And so I was like calling her every day from like various hotels or like in these random places and being like, "Are you still alive?"
Oh, gosh.
And then I lost my passport while we were on tour. So I had to spend an extra night in New York because that's where the Australian embassy is. That's where they like do the emergency passports. And Lovchansky thankfully put me up for a night and I was like completely out of my mind by that point with like exhaustion and stress and like, yeah, I was just dying. But other than that, it was really fun.
Other than being exhausting and stressful at a very bad time personally, it was great.
I think the problem was that we tried to cram too much stuff into too short of a time, and it was really my fault because I had said to like the marketing people at Quirk, I was like, oh, I've taken a week off work because my mom was supposed to come to visit, but then she got sick, and I was like, well, I've taken this week off work anyway. You may as well just cram as much stuff into this 1 week as you can. That was where the mistake started.
Well, do you feel like how do you feel like it went in terms of promoting your book? Do you think it was a good experience for that, or like did it have any impact on, you know, the reception of the book?
Honestly, like the people who did show up to it were really great, but not a ton of people actually showed up. And I think it was because we were doing stuff like midweek, and I was like, I guess people aren't really like going to book talks on like a Tuesday night.
Yeah, I don't know. I would go to a book talk at a Tuesday night.
I think the best stop that we had is that we actually went to London. We went to MCM, which is a big like sort of pop culture-y comic show in London, and that was really fun because there were a bunch of the UK who were like aware of Manfried and were really into it, and we also just got to go to London, and it was really fun. I'd never been to a comic show in London, and it was like this whole new audience that we were able to like reach.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I would also say that a lot of the humor in Manfried is very like kind of Englishy, you know.
Well,
like
it's so funny because like you think there was actually very much a lot of English people who stopped by and were like almost offended by it. Like in that very British sensibility way where they were like, oh goodness. Oh my.
Naked man with a giant cat.
But like then they would come back and buy it. So like obviously like it tickled them the right way.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah.
That's a good experience. I've never been to a comic show in the UK either. I'd like to do. I'd like to go to something.
I really want to do Thought Bubble. I know that that's where everyone is this weekend, and I'm extremely jealous because I'm like following everyone on Twitter and following their adventures and leads, and it just looks like a really fun show. Yeah,
I just need to convince someone to pay me to go. That's what I want.
Right?
I like, you know. I need someone to be like, you know, what we need to have at this particular cartooning show. We need to have, you know, some random Australian talking about comics on the internet. I know just the woman. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like more and more I want to go to shows that are like outside of my usual experience. Like I love the shows that I go to all the time. Like I love TCAF and I love SBX, and you know there's some really great shows, but it's really interesting to see the way different comics shows are run in different parts of the world. Like they have totally different structures sometimes, and like very how do I put it, very different focuses, you know. Like they're not the same as that they are in North America necessarily, or Australia, you know. And we can talk about Australian comic shows till the cows come. There's a whole other thing going on there.
It's I feel like I'm so out of the loop in the Australian comic scene now, because it's been a few years since I've participated.
Well,
I think it's different now. Well, like what's the vibe like back home? You've been there more recently than I have.
Yeah, I haven't lived in Australia for a year now. I don't know. Like I feel like my experience. I love Australian comics. You know, I think some Australian cartoonists are amazing, and I feel really privileged to have like spent a lot of time working with people on different things there. Definitely like the comic art workshop series has been fantastic for me, like in terms of connecting with people. But like I also exist in my own little world. I know a lot of the same people who are doing like indie comics, and everyone goes to zine fairs rather than going to big comic shows like your Supernovas and stuff. You know, that's kind of outside of my my bubble. Like I've exhibited at Supernova before, but like it's not my kind of show. People aren't there for the types of comics that I do.
Yeah.
I think that's always the thing with comic shows in Australia is that there's like, they're very often very focused on specific, types of cartoons in a way that like indie shows like SBX and TCAF aren't. There's like a much wider variety of work there. Yeah. And especially this year when TCAF had the zine show running alongside the actual show as well. Like, that was bonkers. There was so many cartoons there. I didn't get around to everything.
I don't think you could have, even if you'd tried. It's like the shows, as much as I despise those like conventions that go for like 4 days, it almost feels like TCAF and SBX need to be a day longer just because of the sheer volume of people who are there. Yeah, it's hard to like see all the things. It's hard to like, because you want to be able to like look through, especially from my perspective, because I'm often just like looking for new people, to work with. I'm like, who is doing comics in the style and frame that would work for the nib, and you know what I mean, like, which is like hard to ascertain within like 5 seconds of like flipping through someone's work. You have to kind of like go like what subject matter are they dealing with, like how does their work look, but also like what level of interest do they have in making it, because like there are some people who like you were talking about making comics in your spare time. Like, there's so many people who do that, right? Yeah. And some people, it's like that means the only thing they really want to do is work on comics that are specifically for them, Right, yeah.
Yeah, whereas we're asking people to work with an editor to produce a work for a very specific type of publication.
Yeah.
And, that's a different thing. Like, there are plenty of people who I would love to work with who are never going to work with us because they don't like working with editors, or they don't want to do stuff that is like for a different a different audience than an audience that's just made up of their fans,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. But, it does make it hard to like look around at stuff at shows. There's too many people. There's too many talented cartoonists out there.
God damn it. Do you just end up like collecting a lot of business cards?
Yeah, and I take photos of like people's work. Like, this sounds weird, on my phone. Like, I'll take a photo of like a book that someone's made, especially if I can't like I buy a lot of stuff. Just makes traveling back from Canada or like on other flights. Then I think my number one hatred of like travel in the modern era is like the whole luggage allowance thing. It's just like,
it's so restrictive.
And it's really irritating. And I just, most of the time I'm just like, why can't I just check a bag and not have it cost me $30? Like,
right. And then it, like, God forbid you're overweight and they end up charging you like an extra $30 just because you're like a few pounds over their weight limit.
Yeah. Or the wonderful time when I caught a Spirit flight and I didn't realize that I had to pay for my baggage that I took on the plane with me, and they charged me $40 for my carry-on bag, and I was just like, this is bullshit. This is total bullshit. I was irate, and I also that was last year when I was coming back from SBX, so I had like a massive bag of comics.
Oh my god. And then for me it's also like I have this panic when I'm at shows like SBX and I'm exhibiting, where I'm like constantly doing the math about how many books I need to sell to like not be overweight, and then how many I'm allowed to buy so that then I'm also not overweight, because like I'm like, how many of these books am I gonna have to take home with me, and how many of them, like, how much room do I have now to like buy stuff? I mean, obviously this year I didn't buy a ton of stuff because we're moving very soon, and I was like, I don't want to buy a bunch of books that are going to just end up in cardboard boxes, and like we have to put our stuff in storage for a month because our new place isn't going to be ready until November, but we have to move out at the end of September, so we're actually staying in an Airbnb for a month. And I was like, all of these books are just going to go straight into cardboard boxes as soon as I get home, and then into a storage locker. I was like, it's not a good time for buying comics.
No, it's a very bad time for buying comics.
Yeah.
But what's the new place? Is it going to be a nice new place that you're moving into? Is it?
Yeah, it's going to be in like a big condo building. It's going to have 2 bathrooms. That's the selling point that I keep like going back to. Like, holy shit, it's gonna have 2 bathrooms.
Man, well, life is looking up.
I know, right? We're really moving up in the world. And I think it's gonna have like a gym and stuff. So yeah, it's a nice place. It's a nice building.
Very fancy.
Nicer than I feel like I'm ready for. You know how sometimes you're like at a point in your life where you're like, I'm ready for nice things, and I don't know if I'm ready for nice things yet. Because if I have to go back, like, it's gonna be really hard.
Yeah. No, I totally feel that. When we left Vermont, and we'd like been living in a share house with 8 other people, you know, that had 2 bathrooms, but that's still not enough bathrooms for 8 people. Was like really, like, it was really intense. Like, leaving, I was like, I never want to live anywhere like this again. I'm only going to live with my partner and have nice stuff, and you know, it's going to be great. And like, we only have like a 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, and now we have a baby in it, and so 90% of the space is taken up by ridiculous baby oriented things.
Well, actually, the reason that we have to move out of our current place is because our landlord is having a baby. And she, like, initially when she first got pregnant, she was like, oh, don't worry, guys, like, you don't have to move out, blah, blah, blah. And then they started, like, just collecting so much baby stuff that she was like, actually, we're gonna need the whole house.
Yeah. Look, I can relate to that. I mean, my baby is so tiny, but he has, like, I'm just thinking about how many places he has to sleep in that are in our house. He has 4 different, like, bed-shaped objects. He has a docket tot, which is like a tiny little pillow life raft for a baby that you put in your bed, and he has a bassinet, and he has a finished baby box in the living room, which is a box that you put a baby in to sleep, and he has this thing called the magic chair. That's actually not called the magic chair, that's just what we call it, which is like this like rocking thing, you know, like that you put the baby in. And it's amazing, Caitlin, like, this rocking chair, like, the baby will be screaming blue murder, and then you, like, put the baby in this thing, and it turns on, like, basically, like, if the makers of Mario Kart had, like, you know, played Green Sleeves, this is what it would sound like, you know? And you put him in it, and he immediately goes to sleep. It's insane. It's like, this music is terrible, and you're just being rocked electronically back and forth by this, like, on this, like, swing. But it's like, the baby's like, this is the best.
I'm afraid that you're going to get replaced by a robot, Eleri.
And, you know, there are certain moments in my life in the last 2 weeks where I'm like, me being replaced by a robot is an excellent solution. The levels of exhaustion that I'm currently facing.
There's all those hysterical, like, news articles about, like, the robots are coming for your job, but the one job that you thought they wouldn't come for, they're coming for it.
Yes. Mum, job.
Yeah.
That's the job.
They're coming for your job as a mum.
Yeah, it is my new job. My full-time job for at least the next few months. Yeah.
How exciting.
I know. It is exciting. It's kind of exciting because it's like I feel like there's this whole, you know, you're talking about moving into a new apartment. It's like we've moved into this other stage, like this new thing, like, which we've, you know, and it's like almost created like this connection between me and these other mum cartoonists out there. Like,
right.
I have had like advice on like childbirth, and unsolicited advice, I will say, like on childbirth and, you know, rearing babies from so many female cartoonists and male cartoonists out there, like, you know, saying, you know, oh, you'll need to do this, or this is a thing. And like, you know, like Kathy Wilcox, who's an Australian editorial cartoonist, wrote me an email telling me that I needed to like make sure I made the shift from breastfeeding to bottle feeding and breastfeeding early enough so that I didn't inhibit my comics making.
God, it sounds so intense.
Yeah, it is intense, but it's like kind of nice in some ways. It's like, you know, I don't know, like it's like this, I've joined this weird elite club of cartoonists who are also parents that I didn't know was a thing until recently. So yeah.
I mean, it's nice that you, even if it's unsolicited advice, that you have people who are kind of like looking out for you.
Oh, yeah. I think I just said unsolicited because I want to make it clear that I'm like, it's not like I've sought out advice on parenting from people like in the professional field. No, but I think that there's a need. People feel that they want to tell you about, like, they're working in your industry and they want to say, hey, this is how I coped with this situation, you know? And I think that's really nice. And I love seeing how, like, work from people that explores different facets of this stuff because, like, you know, it is really weird to go through. And like we actually did IVF to have this baby,
Right.
and like that's a whole other thing as well, you know, that you go through, like trying to like not just being like we're going to have a baby, but going through like the science of having a baby and
Right.
like all this stuff. And I feel like there are a lot of comics out there that explore like parenthood in different ways, but I actually don't think that it's been exhausted yet. I think that there is room to grow, maybe in the way that like mummy blogging, what was it, mommy blogging, you know, I feel like most of the themes have been exhausted now in that particular medium, but not so in comics. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there's probably not a ton of overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's not. But it's a whole lot. There's so many weird and strange things that happen to you, you know. And it's like we did this pregnancy class thing through our healthcare here where we got to know these other couples who are also having babies at the same time, like within this week-long period. And it was genuinely like being in a sitcom, you know. There's like the hippie mum who's also a Montessori school teacher, you know, and her partner who drives a school bus. And then there's like, you know, the IT professional and, you know, like there's like everyone was like they were all meeting like cliches of people, different people. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm like,
were you like the quirky arty type of the group?
I'm the random Australian
that always manages to show up in sitcoms. Yes.
Yeah, there's always a random Australian. Even Orange is the New Black has the random Australian, right?
That's
like
true,
there's always an Australian there. It's like I remember thinking years ago that like you can't go somewhere without there having already been an Australian there.
Yeah,
like anywhere.
You hear them like just kind of in the distance. You hear someone go, "Nah, mate," and then you're like, "Oh, there they are."
Yes. And then you have the awkward moment where you realise that you've done something that's like really a cliche of being an Australian. Like, oh, okay, here is the one thing that genuinely shocked me about having this baby. Genuinely shocked me. It's like a week ago. So my baby's 2 weeks old today. So a week ago, we like left the house in a big way for the first time after having this baby. And I was like, I want to go to the bar down the street that has the black and white photo booth to take a photo of him as a week-old baby, right? And also I want a drink because I haven't had much to drink in the last 9 months. So I'm pretty excited about getting this beverage. And we go up to the door of the bar and there's like, you know, a sign in the door that says no minors. And the guy at the door says, sorry guys, no minors are allowed. And we're like holding this week-old baby and my partner is like, haha, yeah, that's pretty funny, and then keeps walking, and the guy stops him and he's like, no, really, you can't bring your baby in here. And we were like, what? We were like totally thrown. Like we had no idea that there were places you couldn't bring babies into. Like as Australians, like, you know, this place was open, it was like 5 o'clock on a Sunday and they have a beer garden, you know, where you can bring a dog. So that seemed to us like a fairly key sign that this is the kind of place that you can bring a baby. And I had no idea that there was like that this existed in America. And it turns out in Oregon there are 2 different types of liquor licenses.
Oh,
and one
really?
So there's like some places, and the liquor license is in green if you can have a baby, and it's in red if you can't.
That's wild.
So.
And it's so weird to think, because, like, you know, I'm sure you had a similar childhood to me. Like, we were basically raised in a pub.
I know. I, like, went to pubs all the time when I was a child. And, like, to me, if it has a beer garden that's open on a Sunday afternoon with dogs, that's a fairly key indicator that it's a fine place to bring a baby. But
like, yeah. I was telling some people at work the other day about this memory I have of this pub we used to go to when I was a kid that had like this epic playground, and people would just like drive down there because it was in the suburbs. You couldn't walk anywhere.
Yeah.
You would drive down there. Like all of us kids would be like left it was like a pool and also a playground, so it had like a lifeguard who was essentially like a babysitter. We'd be left there all afternoon. Our parents would get completely trashed and then drive us all home.
Yeah, that's like the way that it goes, right? That's seems perfectly normal to me.
It was a perfectly normal upbringing in Australia. Yeah. And then I was telling some Canadians that, and they were like, seems a bit fishy.
Yeah. Well, all my American friends, what I've said to them, can you believe there are places you can't take babies where there's also beer? They're like, they think I'm insane. And I had like no idea that this was a thing until a week ago.
I guess that's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a cliche of an Australian. I'm the Australian who tried to take the baby into the bar where you clearly can't take babies, you know. But side note, we still haven't found a photo booth to take a picture of the baby, and now he's 2 weeks old. So I think we failed as parents.
I blame the bouncer at that bar.
Yeah. What a jerk. Anyway, there you go. That's my surprising thing about having children.
Can't take them to the pubs anymore. What is this world turning into?
Yeah, you can take comics to pubs, and they're my other babies. Like, no one cares about that. So, you know, I think that really what needs to change is the world, not me.
Yeah.
So,
were you worried at all about, like, raising a child in America?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, I mean, like, it's a thing. Like, I think about how, like, if my kid is 5 and we're still living here, like, he's gonna have to, like, do lockdown training in primary school, you know,
wild.
And yeah, and that's like scary to me. Like, yeah.
What's the state of guns in Oregon? Is it?
I don't know.
Like open carry, or like, because I know that different states have different laws, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Oregon's pretty, it has like a bunch of, I'm actually just going to look at that up right now since I'm on a computer. Again, open carry. It is an open carry state.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Just living a little dangerously over there.
Yeah, but public buildings are off limits unless you have a concealed handgun license.
Jesus Christ.
So,
yeah, when I went to a comic show in Chicago at the start of the year, and they were like, everybody had to go through these like metal detectors and like get their bag searched and stuff, because I guess that Illinois must be an open carry state. But because it was a big convention center, it was like they were like, you're not allowed to bring your guns in here.
I just like that stuff is just crazy to me. Like, I don't understand, like, why anyone would bring a gun to a comic show anyway. Like, that seems ridiculous. But, like, yeah, I don't. I also probably, you know, I'm from Tasmania, so I, you know, like, remember the whole Martin Bryant shooting in Tasmania at Port Arthur in the 90s, where Australia held the second largest number of people shot by a single gunman for many a year. So I feel probably pretty affected emotionally by that experience. You know, I don't really want to, like...
How old were you when that happened?
I was 12.
Right, so, like, definitely old enough to, like, know what was going on.
Yeah, and, like, we had, like, like, our teachers brought everyone into, like, the drama rooms to talk about what had happened, like, on the morning that Martin Bryant was arrested.
Right.
So, like, you know, it was very much, you know, in your face at that point. But also, like, even Hobart's not a very big place. Like, everyone knew someone who was involved in something. And my mum knew the cafe owners. And so, like, yeah, it's kind of, I think that you can't, like, experience, like, even if you're a kid, experiencing, like, those kinds of, like, this is a really big deal and this is a really terrible thing that has happened in your home, you know, and people around you are impacted by it. And, and I remember the gun amnesty stuff. Like, there was a toy gun amnesty that was held outside Parliament House when I was little. And, yeah, it was, I don't know, like, I think that, like, it impacts you in the long run. I don't want anyone...
I was old enough to know that it was happening, but it wasn't, like, I recently watched a documentary about it, and I was like, this is so much more terrifying than I remember it being, because obviously, like, I wasn't old enough to truly grasp the horror of it, because I was probably only about, like, 6 or something when it happened. And, yeah, I remember watching this documentary. I didn't even realize that it, like, went on for a really long time. Like, he was under siege for some amount of time, and...
Yeah, he was, it went on for like 24 hours. And yeah, it's like I remember I did a comic a little while ago about gun laws in Australia for the Nib, and I like read the Wikipedia entry that goes chronological order, like step by step through what he did, and it's horrific. It's like I was like crying the whole time. It was really full on. So yeah, I guess when I think about that stuff, like the impact of like the idea of living in a place where gun ownership and gun violence is so normalized, particularly in schools, that it's kind of scary about having a kid growing up here. That's the thing. Yeah, but like, I mean, otherwise, Portland is really lovely.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure it is. I've been wanting to visit for a long time. I won't be deterred.
Well, you know that I have a 1-bedroom apartment with a couch and a tiny crying child who are always here, Caitlin.
Thank you. Yeah, every time I go to SBX and I see like friends from Portland, I'm always like, this is gonna be the year, we're definitely gonna come and visit. And then it's just like, I always remember that it's really far away, and I'm like, oh, maybe next year.
Yeah, totally. Yes. I think that's the thing about traveling to different shows and stuff, right? Is you have a reason to go somewhere if there's like a big show that you're into going to. So you should try and like if you went to Short Run in November in Seattle, that's really close by to Portland.
Is that a good show?
You often go to VanCaf as well. I will point out that Vancouver is not that far from Portland.
I know, yeah. I'm terrible. And it's always just because like VanCaf is always the weekend after TCAF. And so it's like I can't take extra time off work. So it's always just like, well, I don't know, like this bad timing. It's always bad timing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't plan any kind of... Yeah, you have to, if you're going to do something for fun, you have to like just make it happen. Like you have to plan it. Yeah. So we're doing it for this week, like instead of saying, my mum's not coming, I'm going to go on book tour in a crazy way. You need to say, my mum's not coming, I'm going to go on a holiday.
I'm going to actually have a vacation. Actually, I'm going to go back to Australia next year because it's been a really long time since I've been there.
How long?
Like, next year it'll be 6 years since I've been back there.
Really?
Yeah.
That long? Oh my goodness, that's crazy. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I know, right? So, like, I'll probably go back around April, which will be almost exactly 6 years since we left. Which is crazy to think that it's been that long.
Yeah, I'm kind of, now I'm thinking, wow, I remember when you guys moved. That's holy crap.
Right? I was like doing the math in my head last night, and I was like, God damn, it really has been almost 6 years since we left. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know, you don't have any regrets, though. You guys have built a pretty awesome life in Canada, so,
Yeah, and, like, the only reason that I'm going back is because everybody keeps pestering me now. It's like, 6 years have passed, and, like, my sister has had a few kids, and everybody's lives are kind of moving on, and they're like, when are you going to come back to visit? I was like, I don't know, maybe next year. But it's getting to the point now where it's like, I should probably go back.
Yeah. Well, I keep having these things happen where I, like, feel like I don't have any choice but to go, like, I have to go back home, like, my sister is getting married next year, so I have to go back for that, like that kind of thing. It's like, I feel obliged to these things, but I like seeing my family and stuff. But I spend all my money on airfares. I don't own anything. The most expensive thing I own is my laptop, and I've spent a small fortune on trans-Pacific flights. So
expensive, yeah. And flying from the West Coast is one thing, but like flying from here, it's like literally the other side of the world. So it's like. Matt went back last year, and he was in transit for like 26 hours. Yeah, yep. It's pretty long time.
Well, it's hard to do if you have like an American job. I don't know what Canada's like, but in the States, people get like 2 weeks off a year. So like if you're trying to like go anywhere, it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think and it's the kind of thing where it's like I got to make it worth my time, right? So I gotta hit everything.
Yes.
Like I gotta spend the time. I'll probably like stop in New Zealand and like see my family there. I may
That sounds like
in Hong Kong because I have family there as well. So I was like, I'm just gonna do it all.
Yeah, that's like you could do that in both ways, right? And there's heaps of direct flights from Canada to Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the flight that Matt took actually had a stopover in Hong Kong, so I was like, I suppose I could just get off the plane.
Yes, I mean that is a thing you can do for sure. Get off the plane. Get off the plane. Yeah, go do things. I think I need to go.
Yes.
It's okay.
We've been going for
I feel bad.
No,
Yes.
no. I've actually like finished the work that I set out to do, but I was having such a good time chatting that I just kept going.
Oh, okay. That's nice. I like talking to you too. We should talk more often.
Yes, we should. I actually like, as much as I gripe and moan about having to work on the comic, these live streams are like the highlight of my week because I get to like chat to my friends who I don't usually have an excuse to chat to. I'm just like, yay, I finally have an excuse to like call up random people on Skype and talk.
You don't need to have a reason to randomly call me on Skype and talk. You can do it at any time you like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in a few weeks I'm going to have like all the time in the world to like just have long Skype conversations. I don't even need to like broadcast it on YouTube. We can just talk.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be publicly affirmed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, it was lovely talking to you, and thank you to everyone who has been tuning in. I'm sorry that I had a few people in the chat, but I was so engrossed in our conversation that I didn't acknowledge it. But thank you, DL and Inoue Windwalker, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, our catch-up, and I'll be online again next week.
Yay! Who are you talking to next week?
I believe I'm talking to Zach Clemente. I can never say his last name right. But he just started up his own small press, so it's going to be lots to talk about.
Talk about paper. Lots of paper-oriented things.
Yeah. There'll be lots of talk of paper, and he's also in the UK for Thought Bubble, so I'll be talking to him about that.
You can get the hot goss on that one.
Actually, sorry, it won't be next week because next week is moving week, so it'll be the week after that. Which will be like deadline week, so I'm going to be extremely tired and probably a little bit delirious, so it'll be a very good time.
So you should just talk to me then, because I'm totally sleep deprived and delirious.
It'll be two delirious people just like having a random conversation.
All right, best of luck with the move and finishing the book, Caitlin.
Thank you, and best of luck with little Jarvis.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, see ya.
Okay.